Hi, my name is Keen, and and I'm an alcoholic. Good to be here with all you sickies. Thank you. I was thinking of a feller I know who wanted to be a Shakespearean actor in New York, and he was Puerto Rican, and he used to say things like, friends, Romanos, and homeboys. Very good, Rosie. You did excellent. I wish I could speak some other language as well as you speak English, I'll tell you. And the little Irish girl, you had, to the 10 people who identified as having less than 30 days, welcome. And for those of you who are still wondering, stay here. People usually don't hang out at AA meetings unless there's a reason. And the congratulations to the 6 people who took cakes, 19 years, that's terrific. I too come from an Irish family like the gal who took a cake, and in my family we're divided into 2 groups, either you're in AA or you need it, you know? My mom used to say the only time one of you kids would say no to a drink is if you misunderstood the question. And unfortunately, I'm the only one who's made it, and I've lost some brothers and sisters real young through some real traumatic deaths, including cirrhosis. So it's a tough shot. But I was thinking of the Irish poem that I know, which is, let those who love us, and for those who don't love us, may God turn their hearts. And if for some reason he chooses not to turn their hearts, may he turn their ankles, so we'll know them by their limping. So this is the owner's manual of Alcoholics Anonymous. If you don't have a copy of this book, get one, because this is the program. And then a lot of other stuff that goes on is what we call fellowship. And then there's a thing we call general accounting, you know, where everything else fits in. And if it's not in the book, then it's really not the program. I go places and I hear people that do things, and it works for their group and it works in their community, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's Alcoholics Anonymous. Like up the coast, there's some fanatical groups that say things like, you know, don't have sex for the first year. Now, the average alcoholic stays away from sex for a year. By the time he gets back to it, he'll forget who gets tied up. You know, it's just that's the way it is. You know? And I don't know if you ever saw those that go the whole year. They look like this, you know. It's like, you know. And it's even that kind of advice after you're here a while. You know, a guy shared with me a couple of months ago, he said, Ken, you don't know what sex is all about until you try it in front of a mirror. So I tried it, and I damn near wrecked the car. You know, it was like And I should have read the side view mirror first, because it said objects may appear larger than they really are, you know, like. So make sure if you're going to lose, you lose with the program. Don't lose with any of this other stuff, you know. Like, the big book is real good for me. I like it because it's in language that I can understand. And they use words that are real clear to me, like, you know, we had to let go absolutely. I mean, that shouldn't baffle anyone. You know, we had to let go absolutely. Which means to me that whatever I had prior to getting here just wasn't working for me, so I had to get rid of it. Now, that doesn't sound too complicated, but they now run seminars about that stuff, you know. I don't go to those seminars, you know. People share with me things like, well, you know, Ken, I'm going to something that's like AA. Use the 12 steps of AA. They talk like AA. Costs us $2,000 a month, you know. I come to AA. I get all that shit real cheap, you know. and like my whole philosophy can be summed up real fast. It's like, don't get between a dog and a hydrant, you know. So much of this stuff is just logistics, you know. Don't scratch stuff that don't itch, you know. Just don't do that kind of stuff. Leap before you look. You know, if you wait around to decide what you're going to do, you'll be deciding forever. I know people that the only way they could do less is if they thought more. And that's the way that's why when people call me and they're having real crises in their life, I figured this out. You know, I'm not real scarred by education. In fact, I got through school totally unscarred by education. You know, most of the guys I hung out with, if you spotted us C and A, we'd have trouble spelling cat. I mean, that's just the way we were. And most of the guys in my own neighborhood still think that Moby Dick is a venereal disease. You know, they just don't know. They just don't know. So when I came here, I needed a program that was real simple that I could look at and make some sense at. And I noticed that all the people that I met who were having trouble always started their trouble with the same 3 words. I've been thinking. I never heard anyone say I was meditating and I had this horrendous problem. It's always, I've been thinking. So it came to me that what happens is, the big book says it real clear. It says, if the alcoholic doesn't drink, he tends to act much like other men. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic rests in his mind rather than in his body. I mean, it's real clear. You ought to read that owner's manual. And people go around saying things like, well, I'm going to sit down and think my way out of this. And then they call me. A lot of folks call and say, Ken, what should I do? And I say, go back and reread that chapter in the big book, Into Thinking. You know, you got to go back, read that again. Or maybe that chapter, Into Analyzing, or Into Evaluating, or Into Equating. You know, read one of those chapters that's really going to help you out. You know, this is a program of action. You get up and you go and you do something. And the folks that seem to have the most problem are folks who are sitting home logically trying to approach life. And life is totally illogical. It's totally illogical. And if you're going to sit there and try to think your way into it, you're going to be in deep, deep stuff. Deep, deep stuff. I mean, I went to cash a check right around Christmas time to show you how illogical life is. I went to cash a check at a store. The little gal looks at it and she calls over the manager. The manager looks at me and he says, it's okay. I said, how do you know? She knows me 2 minutes longer than you do. How do you know it's okay? He says, well, you better give me your phone number. I said, if my check is no good, you think I'm going to give you my right phone number? You see, that's the way life is, you know. I called the cable company. I said, when you coming out? They say between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. I say, oh, can you be any more vague? Maybe I'll send them the check between February and March, you know? You know? Then they call me up and say, we didn't get us. I say, you must have stepped out. You know, but this is going on all around. And so when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, I needed something that was real simple. And you guys fortunately have this book, and it's real simple. There's good words in there, and then when I looked the words up because I didn't know what they meant, they began to have a big impact on my life. There's no doubt today whatsoever. I have absolutely no hesitation to tell you this, that this is a spiritual program. It has absolutely nothing to do with thinking. Now, there are some people who run to the big book and say, Ken, it says right here that logic is important. Yes. Reasoning is important. Yes. For as long and as far as it can take you. But it can't take you the distance. It can't take you to where you have to go. So when you start out, it's good. Rely on it. But you get to some point where you have to jettison it. And then you enter the world of recovery. And the world of recovery is the world of miracles. And it's a world of total understanding without understanding anything. People say, I know that. And they don't know what they're talking about. People say, Ken, do you believe in miracles? I said, no, I rely on them. You know, I see people come out of dumpsters. Next thing you know, they're practicing law. You explain that to me, logically, Give me your Pristonian interpretation of that. It just doesn't work. So I needed something real simple. And what I needed to do, and I didn't know this the first day of the first year or the first month, I came to know this. It says that you will get to know things intuitively. I looked up that word intuitive. It means to bypass the thought process. That's what intuitive means. There's no process. You just jump to the answer. When I get up in the morning, just like the book says, I pray for intuitive thought or decision. And if I have an intuitive thought or decision, then I don't have to go through a process. There's no thinking process. It's the thinking process that used to baffle me. Now there's no bafflement. I just jump to the conclusion. They're there. And people say, does that get hazardous? No, you come alive. I see people that plan their whole day with a piece of ledger paper. They get a piece of legal pad and they lay out, today, number 1, I do this, number 2, I do that, number 3, I do that, and they have a whole list. And then if they do something extra, they add it to the list. And you say, well, where's the spot in there for intuitive thought or decision? Where's the spot for God to reach you and help you? The book is real clear to me. It says in the doctor's opinion, we have to have an entire psychic change. I looked up that word psychic. We misuse it in our vocabulary to a degree. It really means soul. It comes from the Greek word soul. What we need is a soul change. This is a spiritual program. We need to get something that nourishes my soul that I had lost or misplaced or gone to sleep with somewhere along the line. And what I had to do was, as I looked at my life, I had set up a defense against life. I was so afraid of life, I didn't want it to come and get me. So I built all these defenses. That was my security. And what AA has done for me is it's allowed me to tear down all the fences, throw away all the moats that kept me away from life, and allow life to come and get me. And then I find out it's not such a bully. It has absolutely no power at all. There's a chapter in here, it says a vision for you. It doesn't say a fantasy, doesn't say a dream. It says a vision. I didn't know what a vision was, so I looked up dream first. A dream is something where you distort reality. A vision is something where reality sets in. And that's what started to happen to me. I had a vision of what life was all about. I didn't know. I grew up in a household, as I said, that was made up of alcoholics. Not bad people, just drunks. And that's what they did best. They drank. And they did it all the time. There's a lot to be said for consistency. There was never any doubt whether anybody was going to get drunk. If they were awake, they were going to get drunk. And it kind of worked that way. And then when I got here, what I had to do was read this book and jettison the idea that somehow, some way, I was going to get better all on my own. And in that chapter, as I started to say, A Vision for You, it says in there, real clear, it says someday the alcoholic will reach a point where he won't be able to imagine life with alcohol or without alcohol. And he'll know loneliness as few do. And he'll be at a jumping off place. And he'll wish for the end. And then the next sentence is the kicker. It says, we have shown how to get out from underneath that. And how we get out from underneath that is we say, yes, I am willing. Yes, I am willing. Real clear to me means yes, I'm willing. And what did I have to start doing was instead of saying no to life, for me I had to start saying yes to life. Yes, I want what you have. Yes, I'm willing to do what you did. Yes, I'm willing to go to any length. Yes, I want it. I'm willing. And I had to open up my mind and jettison my old ideas. And that meant all of them. Because that word there kind of says that. It says absolutely. We had to let go absolutely. Not a tough word. Doesn't seem to cause a lot of confusion. To me, anyway. You get rid of that stuff. And then when I got rid of that stuff, it made room for new stuff to come in. And what started to happen to me was I began to realize that the most important thing in my life, and I didn't know it at first, was the continuity of my sobriety. I got a 90-day token. And back in New York where I got sober, they used to give out tie tacks. And the tie tack had the triangle just like you guys have here. And the middle of the triangle was a dot. And on either side was AA. And at the top was a G. And they used to say, the dot in the middle is you. And if you keep yourself between Alcoholics Anonymous and God, you won't get drunk. And so I got a tie tack. Big deal. Big deal in my life. I had not been drinking for 90 days. Then I got a 1-year token. My wife and kids had moved away when I was drinking, as well they should, because I had a lot of bad habits when I was drinking. I used to find things before people officially lost them, you know? And it seems there's some laws about that kind of stuff. And I had a way of, and somebody mentioned it here, you know, Joe or Dan or somebody said something about, you know, shooting off your mouth too much. It seemed like I was always getting a barroom facial. Part of my insanity was that wherever I was standing was my real estate. And in the morning, I wouldn't have given you 2 cents for it, but if someone told me they wanted it, it became the most important piece of real estate in the world. And many a time, I would sit in the emergency room at 2, 2:30, 3, 3:30 in the morning and hear a doctor say, don't worry, we'll straighten it out, and we'll do this, and you get these stitches. And I'd be saying, well, I hope I maintain that real estate. I hate to think I lost it after all this. And it wasn't worth anything. And that's what I was doing my whole life. I was trading off stuff for stuff that wasn't worth anything. And you know, I watch the news today. I don't watch a whole lot of it. It's very depressing. But I watch what people buy. And that gives me an idea where the country's going. And one of the biggest sellers over the Christmas holiday was a toilet seat alarm. It was a button. You put it on the bottom of the toilet seat. And women always complain that when they go during the night to the toilet, they sometimes fall in the dumpster, because their hubbies and boyfriends, etc., have left the seat up, so they take a splash. So what this alarm does is that if you leave the seat up over 40 seconds, now somebody did a lot of research and they found out that's how long it takes the average male to pee, that if you leave this seat up for 40 seconds, it starts beeping. This way your loved one won't take a swim, you know? And I say, gee, you know, like some guy coming out of MIT, that's what he did with his whole life, following guys into the John. Okay, start it up, you know? And you say, is that the world, you know? Is that the world? And so what I had to do is I had to come to a lot of meetings, and I had to find out that there was a power in these rooms, and there was a power greater than myself that would do for me those things that I was totally unable to do for myself. And what I was totally unable to do for myself was to live in the now, one day at a time. I could live in the past, I could project in the future, I just couldn't live in the now. I had absolutely no concept of what was going on right now. I was either reflecting back on what had already happened and how I was going to get out of that, or projecting about how they were not going to let me get out of that. And my whole life was spent running around, accomplishing absolutely nothing. And when I got here, I remember one of the old guys came up to me. The first meeting I went to was July 5th, 1970, back in New York. And I walked into that meeting, and the day before I had been watching cartoons on TV and drinking, and I decided to go to this meeting because a lot of people had told me that I needed help, and I could get it in Alcoholics Anonymous. So I went, and I walked into this meeting in July, and I was wearing a blue wool suit. And somehow they knew right away I was a newcomer, you know. Guy came over to me and he said, newcomer. I said, yeah, you know, like. He said, well, sit over here. So I sat, and the meetings in New York started at 9 and they ended at 10, and they used to say no soul saved after 10. And after the meeting was over, they kind of gather around you. You know, it's like circling the wagon so you don't sneak off. And the deal was, is they gave me this big book, and I had an owner's manual. And I always thought when I was growing up, I was the youngest of 7 kids in a family where my dad died and my mom did all she could to keep us together. And the deal was, when I was growing up, I always felt that I'd live my life in such a way that someday I would do something so good that they would write a book about me. And they did. They did. The big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was there on every page, you know. And I remember the old timers used to say things like, son, this is a game where losers win. And I say, God, you know, these guys, maybe they've been here too long, you know. But that's the way they used to talk. It was all spiritual, mystical stuff. Nobody ever answered a question. You used to say, why don't you guys answer a question? You always answer a question with a question. They say, do we? You know, like, you never could get the answer. And then they'd always say, read the book. You know, go read the book. And come to more meetings and help other people. And it began to be painfully clear to me after, you know, I'm a quick learner, about 6, 8 years, that the secret seemed to be in the big book, going to meetings and helping other people and getting out of yourself. You know, it's like today when I watch a movie and I'm trying real hard to figure out who the actor is, and I know I should know the name, and the more I try to force that name, the less it comes. Now I go do something else, and I'm right in the middle of doing something else an hour, 2, 3 hours later, and I say, Humphrey Bogart, or Clark Gable, or whatever the name was. It just comes to me. And that's what I do today when I have something going on in my life that I don't understand. I go and do something with somebody else. And in the process of doing something with somebody else, whatever the answer is, it comes to me. Now, I can't give you that in a format. It's just happened that way all the time. Every time I'm helping somebody else, good things seem to happen to me. I don't understand it most of the time. But I've come to understand that's the deal. Now, I like the little analogy here of, well, I can't take a cake and keep the $19, but I'll go outside and find $100. You know, that's good thinking. About 4 or 5 year thinking. So you're right on target. You're right on target, yeah. A big spiritual debate. Do we keep this or not? And what you come to find out here is that there's a universal law, and you get to know it. And it's not knowing it by someone telling it. It's knowing it by feeling it. When you're here a while, one of the great things that will happen to you, I hope it happens fast, but it will happen to you if you stay here, is you'll come to the realization that the only truth that you're ever going to have is through your own experience. We can talk about all this stuff, you can read it, but until you experience it, it's not your truth. It's just somebody else's philosophy. And that's why the old timers used to say, you know, truth here doesn't come on the installment plan. It comes all at once. 1 minute you're in darkness, the next minute you're in truth. It happens just like that. And the same thing happens in meditation. That's why we have a step for meditation. Meditation is suspending time. It's a quantum leap out of the mind. It's not worrying about there and then. It's realizing there is no there and then. There's only here and now. This is the only place that I can meet God, right here in the moment. And if I miss that opportunity, I miss it. It's gone. And after a while, that's really the focus of why I'm here. I'm here because I want to grow along spiritual lines. I'm here because I want to take my whole life and do for other people. I'm no longer interested in how I end up, because I know from experience and that in doing it that way, I've always end up okay. The more I try to plan my life, the less it came out. The less attention I gave to detail, the better it was. In fact, when I was drinking, my boss told me one time, the things that you do best are the things you forget, you know? And he was right, because somehow they'd have a chance of working out. But when I was working on him, it was a catastrophe. And I learned not to take responsibility for things that are not my responsibility. I just don't do that anymore. You know, there's a story told that a mouse, Mr. Mouse, went out cruising the bars, and he picks up Mrs. Elephant, and he takes her home, and they make passionate love all night long. And in the morning when he wakes up, he looks over at Mrs. Elephant, and there she is on her back, her feet in the air. She's dead as a doornail. And poor Mr. Mouse goes, wow, one night of fun, and I spend the rest of my life digging a grave. You know, like, you know, if you didn't do it, don't take responsibility for it, you know? Don't do that to yourself. And at some point, you're going to have to come to the realization that your parents and everybody who worked on you along the line did the very best they could. And that what my book tells me is that I have to jettison that stuff. At some point, I have to take responsibility for me and my life and what I'm doing today. And I don't have to keep beating up on people, most of whom are dead and the rest are feeble. You know? I don't have to do that. Some guy called me last week. He says, I have this issue. When I came in, we used to call them character defects. Now they're issues, you know. I have this issue with my parents. I said, how old are they? He said, 80. I said, instead of going to 87 other meetings, why don't you do this? Why don't you just wipe them out in one shot? I said, what time did they used to put you in bed? He said, oh, they put me in bed 6, 7 o'clock when I was a kid. I said, okay, wait till 4 in the morning and call them. And when you call them, say, hey, this is Larry, and I'm still up, and it's 4 in the morning. You know? And I'm sitting here, and the refrigerator door is wide open. And I got every light in the house on. And I'm only 3 inches from the TV. And I'm leaning back in my chair. Just thought you'd like to know that, Mom. You know? And get rid of that. Get it all over with. You know, let it go. And what I have found out for me through experience, and that's all I can share with you, my experience, strength, and hope, is that my experience was that when I let other people off the hook, that's when I got off the hook. As long as I was resentful and angry and all that kind of mishmash, I was only beating up on one person, me. This little bozo book says when there's a problem, you look at where you're at fault. You clean up your side of the street. We're not worried about the wrongs others have done. We grow up here. You know, grow up. I know he's not talking to me, you know. But I watch folks, they're milking a mouse, you know. Yeah, 1942. Stop milking that mouse. You know, I have a God that has a great sense of humor. And I've come to appreciate that sense of humor. I mean, any God that would give male his sexual potency height at 18 and woman hers at 38 has got to be a good guy. You know, it's like, hey, yo, Mary, watch him work with this. Hey, yo. You know? And before I sponsor anyone, I tell them, you got to read page 132 and 133 in the big book, where it talks about we are not a glum lot. You know, we have recovered and we've been given the power to help others. We don't need the power for ourselves. We get it to help others. We know God wants us to be happy, joyous, and free. God doesn't give me my misery. I create it myself. You know, you got to grow up at some point. You got to just say, hey, I'm going to get on with life. I don't know about you guys, but I shared with you very briefly at the beginning that in my family, a lot of family members didn't get it. My dad was dead at 50. I had a brother who died New Year's Day of 86. Sister-in-law who died in 85 on Christmas Day. They died a week apart. She went in the hospital in October and suffered with cirrhosis for a month and a half and died Christmas Day weighing 60-some pounds. And my brother died the week later. And my nephew, who saw both of that, went out and got picked up for drunk driving. You know, we're slow learners here. We don't want to see the reality of life. The only reality is God. All the rest of it is paper mache. You can punch holes in it anywhere. And as a result of the people that I know personally, I ended up going in an 18-month period to the cemetery about 11 times. And I can tell you that every cemetery is exactly alike. Every headstone is exactly alike. It has your name, when you were born, and when you die. And I don't care if you live 100 years. There's only a little dash like that in between. That's life. You're the dash, you know? I didn't measure it, but it's not more than 3 or 4 inches. I don't know about you guys, but I'm along in the dash. I don't want to waste one day trying to figure out any of this nonsense. I want to get up and go and have fun, and I do that. You know, I'm unscarred by education, but I read a lot. Last year in this country, 97% of the people who died laying down in bed. When my alarm goes off in the morning, I get up, you know? You know? He made a mistake, let him live with it, you know, like... And as soon as I'm up, I want to go screw something up. I don't want to lose my skills, you know? I have a trampoline, and I pull it out of the closet, and I have the theme from Rocky, and I put that on a tape, and I sleep in the buff, and I put on a cowboy hat that they gave me in Greeley when they heard this story, and the music starts playing, dun, 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 and I'm jumping up and down in the mirror like, whoa! And I figure if I can start the day laughing at me, I'll catch up with you guys later on, you know? And that's the way life is supposed to be. It's a party, it's a joke, and we're the punchline. And most folks are trying to figure out what's the punchline. You are, you know? Does he really do that? Yes, yes. And I have hats and horns by my phone, and when people call, I play that stuff, and I blow the horns, and I remind them, this is a party. We're supposed to be having fun here. I go to meetings, and I hear people say, I'm 6 years sober. And that's my cake. And I'll share it with you. And I'm happy. You say, God, if you're happy, tell your face. You know, like, give me a break. And this is what I enjoy doing the most. I enjoy going, sharing with other people and hearing them laugh, because I know 3 things about laughter. Sometimes I make a complete fool of myself, but that's okay. I play that role well. But I know 3 things when I hear people laughing. Number 1 is you cannot laugh and think at the same time. So I am doing you a favor. I'm taking you away from your worst enemy, you. The second thing is that when you hear yourself laughing, you remember how to laugh. You forget sometimes in the middle of all this nonsense we call living that we're supposed to be laughing. And the third thing is if you can hear yourself laugh about something, you know it's not that bad. And that's just the way it is. And that's what life is. It's getting up and getting out and enjoying it and taking that day and tearing it apart without hurting anyone. And having a good time doing it, you know, and not projecting about, well, I wonder what's going to happen now that the war's over, the Cold War. Before we worried what was going to happen during the Cold War. Now it's like, oh, this communism's falling apart too fast. I mean, can you believe this stuff? I mean, that's the whole mind. The mind is always projecting a problem. I mean, that's what it does best. That's all it does. Outside of making change at alpha beta, I don't use mine, you know? I have come to the realization for me that my mind is a coward, and that God, as I understand him today, has always been calling me to come forward. Come on, come on. It's okay, come on.
And what I have perpetually done is found reasons not to go. I got to do this today, God. I'll get to you later. I'm going to do this today, God. I got to work on my career today, God. I got to do this, God. I got to do this. I got to accumulate that. I got to buy insurance for this. I got to fix that. Boy, those are lame excuses for life. I don't want to end up my whole life just being, he finished all this stuff on his yellow pad. You know, oh boy, what an epitaph. Thank you much. Yeah. What did he do in life? He finished, boy. That boy finished. He was a slow starter, but he came on strong. You know? I don't want that to be my life. I want my life to be totally used up doing exactly what that book says, and that is doing God's work. Whatever I can do, I want to be able to do it. I don't want to be hanging around finding out what's going to improve me. I have already proven to myself that the best thing I can do for me is abandon myself to God. I took the third step of Alcoholics Anonymous. I turned my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand Him. And two things were accomplished when I did that. The first was I surrendered. The war's over. I'm not fighting. Take me, use me, do what you want. And the second thing is, by surrendering, I've done away with having to judge anything. The value is gone. What comes next must be of God if I've turned my will and my life over to Him. So I don't have to think in terms of this is good, this is bad, this is inconvenient. It's just, this must be God's will. I'll go and do it. And if I get used up doing what I believe to be God's will, I don't see where I'm going to get hurt. I just don't see it. My life today is better than I could ever imagine it. It's much better than I could ever. I could have never planned it to come out this good. I became a grandfather, which is a whole new experiment for me. I just can't wait to screw this kid up, you know? I have two kids. They're totally unscarred by alcoholism, it seems. My one kid, a funny kid, he got married and then he had this baby. You know, I proposed with my wife with two great words. You're what? You know, like, and he went to school and knew what he wanted to be and then came out and became it. I have another boy who's an actor. He's a real healthy, creative kid, kind of like the guy who was first here tonight. He's really alive. That's great. That's the way he is. He called me a couple of weeks ago. He said, Dad, they're doing another edition of Jesus Christ Superstar at the Henry Fonda Theater, and I'm up for the lead. I said, oh, wow, that's great. He said, yeah. He said, I thought you'd like to know. You'll be able to say, that's my son, Jesus. See, I don't know about you guys. When I first came here, I could never kid about that kind of stuff. When I first came here, I was intimidated by God because I didn't understand Him. I had no understanding of Him. Somewhere along the line, I had gone to sleep spiritually. I just didn't grow. In the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it tells me real clear. It says, after step 2, we are reborn. To me, that meant I was reborn in the Spirit. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind, as I stand before you tonight, that when I was sent out from the home office as a child, I was okay. But I had parents and teachers and people that wanted to help me. And along the way, things get a little out of whack. And I died somehow. Spiritually, I went to sleep. And now we talk about a spiritual awakening, a spiritual experience, something happening. See, I can buy that stuff real easy. I was never able to stop drinking. I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, and something did happen. I stopped. I'm stopped now almost 20 years. It's a long time for me. I could never stay stopped on my own. It's exciting. And I've learned to take that inward journey, not outside. What goes on out here is fun and games, but what really counts, what I live with, is what's inside of me. I want inside today. And the only way that I know how to get inside is through prayer and meditation and doing these little basic bozo stuff they talk about in the big book. And God, that I understand Him, likes to do bank shots just to show off. You know? He lets me think I'm accomplishing something over here, and then he does something wonderful over there. He distracts me by giving me some little alcoholic to work with so I can get out of the way and he can go do what he wants to do. And it's always better than I can imagine. I don't know about you folks, but as I look back at my life now, it's worked out well for everybody, and it's worked out in ways I would have never thought of. That's got to be some kind of a miracle. And I read that poem, by Robert Frost. It says, "The woods are lovely, dark and deep, and I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep." And to me, the woods that he's talking about is what was inside of me. They were dark. My woods were real dark. And I had to set sail for a journey inward. And I couldn't take anyone with me. This is not a picnic where you can call up a half a dozen friends and go. I had to make this journey alone. And as I made that journey inward, I began to sustain that psychic change that they talk about in the big book. Nothing changed, but everything was different. It was kind of like Scrooge waking up on Christmas morning. He only suffered one night. But he had a spiritual experience. And we had a chance to see as an audience what it was like, what happened, and what it was like now. And in that one night, he came to understand that it was going to have to be different. So he began to live differently. And then different things began to happen. And it gets real easy if you don't complicate it. The worst thing that can happen is to interfere in your own life. And I watch folks run around and they're trying to figure everything out, and there's absolutely nothing to figure out. And they're so busy listening without hearing. And we're so concerned with what words mean and who said what and when they say it, and we miss the message. And the message is, there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. And it's the God of your understanding, not my understanding. Find your own little bozo God. Get one you can do business with. And the deal is that you'll find out it gets real simple. And you learn to listen differently. You don't cut people off in the middle of sentences because you feel you have something to say. You let them go to the end. A lot of times we make the assumption that because someone is talking, they understand what they're about to say. A lot of times people start talking, they have absolutely no idea what they're trying to say. They don't know what their problem is until they get a chance to hear it, and it takes a while to get to it. It's like the guy who was 86 years old who went to the sperm bank. And the lady said, "What are you doing here?" He said, "I'm going to leave sperm." She said, "Sir, you're 86 years old." He says, "I'm going to leave a deposit." So she said, "All right, here's a jar. Go down the hall, fill it up, and bring it back." So the poor guy went down the hall, and he was gone about a half hour. She got real panicky. She went down and knocked at the door, and she heard this voice say, "Come in." So she walked in, and there was this guy all ruffled up in the corner. And he looked at her, and he said, "Miss," he said, "I've used my right hand." He said, "I've used my left hand." He said, "I even banged it off the wall." He said, "I can't get the lid off this jar, And it would have been real easy for her to project a problem onto him that he didn't have. And for 2 years, he'd be running around trying to solve it, So you learn to listen. And what you find out is this thing we call alcoholism is a play that's put on all over the world. We just dress it up in local costumes to meet local requirements. But it's a play that's played all over the world. And it's the same play. Somebody who's selfish and self-centered and dying spiritually. And what happens is they come here and they begin to realize that life has so much to offer. And then they begin to laugh. At first you start out laughing at everybody else because they're laughing at you. And then after a while you realize everything is laughable. It's a joke. We are the punchline. And once you understand that, you don't figure anything out. And you get a chance to go and live life on the natural. You don't have to do industrial amounts of anything. You just get up and you go and you do. And it gets more and more peaceful all the time. And people look at you like you have an answer. And you do. And the answer you have is Alcoholics Anonymous. This spiritual program that allowed a little bozo like me to come off the streets, that allowed a little bozo like me who didn't know how to be a father or a husband or a human being to be touched by whatever power was here, and a lot of nice people reaching out and helping me and pointing me in a direction and saying, you know, don't bite my finger, just follow where I'm pointing, you know. And I began to do those little basic things that they talk about. And I found out that most of the things that I was afraid of were make-believe. Fear is make-believe. The book says it's an evil and corroding thread, but it's make-believe. It's not real, but it appears real. It's like an ego is not real, but it appears real. And what you find out here is that you can't get over fear or ego directly. It's like trying to overcome darkness. Before you overcome darkness, at some point you got to start talking about light. You just do it that way. And once you start introducing light, then you can talk about overcoming darkness. And here, once I started introducing spiritual progression, I began to overcome darkness. Some little guy sat under a tree back in the 1600s, Newton, and an apple fell out and hit him on the head, supposedly. And he came up with the idea that there's a pull on the earth, and that pull takes things down. Gravity. He didn't invent it, he just became aware of it. And in science, and again, I'm not a heavy hitter, but in science they say there's a reaction to everything and an opposite to everything. So if there's something to take me down, there must be something to take me up. And I call that God. There's a spiritual pull here. And I get a chance to see it in little kids who understand that stuff. We have a little place down in our area, Seaport Village, where the little kids play and they fly kites. And several months ago, they were flying kites down there, and there was low clouds, and I went up to this little kid, because kids know everything. That's who I like to talk to, not adults. They're too confusing. And I said to this kid, how do you know your kite is still up there? You can't see it with the clouds. And he looked me right in the eye, and he said, mister, I know it's still there because I can feel the pull of it. And that's the deal with me. When I'm doing the things that I'm supposed to be doing, I feel the pull of it. It's just there. It's so strong. There's no walking away from it. It's just there. And when I'm going against that grain, the pull of it is just as strong. Just as strong. And I know I'm going in the right direction. And it gets so you get in touch with everything around you. I was driving my car during that heat wave. And I looked in my mirror, I had my air conditioner on, and there was a Rottweiler chasing after me down the street. That's a Doberman on steroids. Big, big, big dog. So I love animals, so I pulled over, and I put my window down, and he came up, and he was... So I looked at him, and I said, what now? And he looked at me. And just for that moment, we were on the same wavelength. Because that dog knew I had chased after shit all my life, having no idea what I was going to do when I caught it. So we made this spiritual contact. So I let him catch his breath. I said, hang in there, brother. And I left. Now, if someone were driving behind me, they might label that insane. I call it living. See, I'm not at war anymore because, like the big book said, I stopped fighting everyone and everything. And the war's over. All we're here to do is work out the peace. And in the meantime, I get to live the best life possible. I'm not going to take your time. I'm going to close with a little story. It's an Irish story. My mom used to tell it all the time. And it always means a lot to me because it just reminds me of my mom. And she died during that period too. And she used to tell a story about Johnny. And Johnny was this little boy, and he went to parochial school. And next to every parochial school is a church. That's just the way they do it. And he would run into church and he would kneel down and he'd say, "Hello, God, this is Johnny. I just want to tell you I'm here." And then he'd get up and boogie. And he'd go back at lunch and after school, Saturdays and Sundays, weekends, holidays, summer. That was his spiritual program, real simple. "Hello, God, this is Johnny. I just want to tell you I'm here." And my mom told the story that when he got to be 12 or 13, he contracted polio. And when she used to tell this story to us, there was no cure for polio. And this kid was in a room, and he was surrounded by his teacher and his friends and his chums and his doctor and his parents. And my mom said a voice was heard to say, "Hello, Johnny. This is God. I just want to tell you I'm here." And that's the way this thing has been for me. Whenever I reached out, anywhere, anytime, you guys were there for me. And I really appreciate that. And I hope that whenever any of you reach out, anywhere, anytime, I'm there for you. In the meantime, take real good care of one another. We're only on loan. God love you.